Thank you so much, Jessica, for that introduction. Good evening, everyone. I'm really, really happy to be here tonight in such a gorgeous community. The drive down from the Bay Area was absolutely beautiful. It was breathtaking. Those 3 hours flew by, apart from the fact that I did not find any traffic on the way here, so that was also lovely. What a treat. My name is Ofelia Bello. I am a lifelong resident of the Bay Area. I am born and raised in East Palo Alto, a small town in the southeast of San Mateo County. We are neighbors to Stanford University, probably one of the more well-known landmarks right in our neighborhood. And I am really excited that I just heard that your next series will be talking about placemaking, because there are some common threads here. You'll see in just a little bit how the work that we do at PAHALI Community Land Trust also connects to placemaking and placekeeping. So what a perfect setup. So I'm a fan of roadmaps, a little bit of a table of contents here, and wanted to give a brief overview of some of the topics that we'll be exploring today. Those include what is a community land trust, of course, why and how did this model emerge, what are the hallmarks of a community land trust, how do they operate, where else do we see these models exist throughout California. We'll get a little bit into what PAHALI Community Land Trust is doing in East Palo Alto as somewhat of an example, a little bit of a case study. And we'll talk a bit more about what other resources there are out there. If you're a bit more curious, want to learn a little bit more about community land trusts, take a deeper dive, or maybe you're thinking about potentially wanting to create one. So I'll leave you with a couple of leads as well. So first things first. Integral to understanding community land trusts really is understanding the history that they emerge from. In the 1960s, you all probably have read in history books, know people, may have been around a little bit for what was going on in the country at that time. In the 1960s, Black communities experienced displacement as a retaliation for organizing and challenging segregation. Their response was Students Nonviolent Coordinating Committee, or SNCC, a very well-known civil rights activism group, an Albany movement in Georgia, so in the Deep South, worked with Black farmers and sharecroppers to secure land ownership, again, in response to this sort of retaliation and persecution for wanting to challenge segregation. In 1969, New Communities Incorporated was established, with the mission of holding land in perpetual trust for Black community members, specifically for sharecroppers, for people who were farming the land, tending to the land, and doing the labor of love of finally being able to implement and practice self-determination. Then in 1970, New Communities Incorporated purchased over 5,000 acres, the largest tract of land owned by Black people at the time. And they continue to hold this land today. You can imagine that the roots of the CLT movement here in the United States really it means that today this movement continues to be anchored in those similar values. Understanding the history helps us cement in our mind how CLTs seek to address the legacy that is still palpable today, that we know any of us who have worked in the realm of housing justice, around housing advocacy, around trying to get people housed in affordable housing, around trying to help people own a home. There is a history, a legacy of inequitable access, unfortunately by design, in our country. What you see here on the right-hand side is a map of San Francisco, a redlining map specifically from the 1930s, which is just one of the ways that racism was institutionalized in this country, and we're still working to undo that today. People of all walks of life, we know today, experience challenges with accessing housing that's safe, healthy, affordable, and stable for them. Yet we know that the legacy of institutionalized racism plagues at a disproportionate rate Black, Indigenous, people of color in our communities. through examples like this, through redlining, through the legacy of segregation. I know in East Palo Alto, there are elders who can still recount stories of block busting in our communities. And it's something that we're still working to undo today. So because those inequitable practices were intentional, our responses also have to be intentional. And the CLT movement, after hearing a little bit about its history, reminds us that it's rooted in values of self-determination, anti-displacement, collective control and governance of land and homes, physical and cultural preservation of precious community resources and assets. So it's something that I think anyone who loves their community, many of these check the box when we say, yeah, these are things that we want our neighbors to have, we want our neighborhoods to experience. So, contextualizing the problem to what we're seeing today when it comes to addressing the issues that we see in the realm of housing. The problem I sort of teased out to community-wide problems and then how they're experienced at an individual level. So at a community level, we know that there have been pressures around gentrification, and I know we certainly feel them very acutely in East Palo Alto in the Bay Area. I'll get a little bit into PAHALI Community Land Trust and my local community of East Palo Alto, but to give you a little bit of a specific example, East Palo Alto is located specifically, almost perfectly in the middle of Google campus, Facebook campus, Stanford University. We are down the street from offices that are not headquarters, but bring in employees from Amazon, from Yahoo, from YouTube. So we're in Silicon Valley. I mean, it's no mystery that San Mateo County, I think, is one of the highest income, one of the counties with the highest income in the country. But that's not true for East Palo Alto, a historically Black, brown, and just racially diverse and ethnically diverse community. So that's the first bullet point. We see that gentrification through various ways has been uprooting longtime residents, whether it's not having a competitive enough wage, seeing that we sometimes see examples of homeowners who are elderly, aging in place, and are on fixed income, and then they experience either challenges around maintaining their home. We see tenants. We are a majority tenant community. Unfortunately, I believe it is a trend across the country that we have less and less homeowners, and we have a growing population of renters and tenants. And the protections that are afforded to tenants and the units that they live in are limited. For example, in California, there's a state law, Costa-Hawkins, which prevents single-family homes from having any sort of price controlling. And it's one of the challenges that we see in East Palo Alto when the rent of single-family homes can be exorbitantly hiked up from one month to another with no sort of repercussions or limitations or regulations. We also see a lack of community-driven policies that support the right to remain. And this is not exactly an exhaustive list. It probably would fall off the page if it was. But the last bullet point I have here is that community of longtime renters, sorry, I omitted a word, but our community of longtime renters have no pipeline of opportunities to different models of homeownership. Sometimes a traditional homeownership model doesn't quite work for many of the people in our community. How these problems are experienced on an individual level, people are not able to remain in their home, of course, which is a big challenge. Homes are sold from underneath them. They may be victims of predatory lending or were once upon a time and don't quite find out until later on. The mortgages, and AKA the home sale prices that are available, are exorbitantly high. There's economic hardship and housing instability, both of which impact health. And it becomes very difficult to be civically engaged and to be an active member of your community, attend school meetings for your child's school, do any of the things that really help communities feel safe and thrive, all because of a lack of housing stability. So last slide, I think, to emphasize the problem. I threw together this sketch, so don't judge my graphic design. But it's really just to emphasize how steeply the price of single-family homes has climbed, specifically in East Palo Alto. What you see on the left-hand side, this is ACS data, by the way, is in 2010, the median household income around $48,000, very modest. And you see the median home sale price at around $250,000. Pretty modest, maybe out of range for some people at that point in time, but still maybe some people could get their foot in the door. We jump over to 2020 and we see only a modest increase in the median household income at $55,000. Yet we see a very sharp increase in the price of the median home sale price for single family homes. Let me reassure you that these homes are not luxurious. These are not homes that are, we're talking thousands and thousands of square feet. These are very humble bungalows, single family homes in a community that has historically been, by and large, a working class community made up of people of color, of immigrants, very diverse across the board. So that's the problem that we're up against when it comes to at least accessing and getting our foot in the door for home ownership. So, but now the exciting part. So what does the CLT model have to offer? Again, parsing it out for community level and then individual level. At the community level, we're talking about collective ownership and stewardship of community land and assets. A practice of shared responsibility, shared resources, accountability, because there's various parties involved, multiple stakeholders involved. There's a variety in ownership types. It's not just one traditional model anymore. We're talking about expanding the opportunities that people who may want to step into home ownership have. And it strengthens civic engagement. When we have communities and neighborhoods that have housing stability, they're able to do the things that I mentioned a little bit earlier, but from a more challenging perspective. When one has housing stability, you're able to be civically engaged. You're able to show up at city council. You're able to participate in electoral campaigns. You're able to just do more because you have more time by virtue of perhaps having the stability and being able to afford your home. Maybe you don't have to work 3 jobs anymore, or 2, you can just work 1. At the individual level, we have being more rooted in community for all of the reasons that I sort of elaborated upon toward the end here. We have long-term stability and security through permanent affordability, which we'll get into in just a little bit. Improved health outcomes, physical and mental. In East Palo Alto, we have a life expectancy that is in the double digits. I want to say last time I checked, I lament to say probably around 20 years less than our neighboring jurisdictions, Atherton, Menlo Park, Palo Alto. That can't exclusively be for a singular reason. There's probably a whole lot that's going into why there's a far less life expectancy, or far lower life expectancy for residents of East Palo Alto as compared to our more affluent neighbors. Sustainability and improved quality of life, protection from displacement, affordability, and access are all things that are afforded to individuals who live in CLT communities. When I tell you all that the last time I spoke on the phone with one of our CLT residents, he could not impress on me enough the gratitude of being a CLT homeowner because he was able to have, I asked him, what's your favorite thing about it? He said, the peace of mind of knowing that I'm not going to be displaced, the peace of mind of knowing that I finally own the home and have some control over the home that my family lives in, that I've raised my children in. This is a multi-generational family that lives in this single family home. And it really resonated with me that, you know, I thought the first thing he might say, well, it's affordable, that's awesome. But he said the peace to just be able to go on about his day knowing that his family is permanently stable in the home that they were previously renting for, I believe it was between 10 and 15 years, maybe like 12 years. So That is one of the things that is amazing to hear from CLT residents when we ask them. The last thing I'll mention here is that similar to the example of the resident who I just mentioned, now new, most recent CLT member, homeowner, is that because the housing prices in East Palo Alto are so exorbitantly high, it's pretty similar for the rents, also exorbitantly high. We have so many renters in our community of single family homes who have likely paid their mortgage more than once over. We have a community of many long-term tenants who've been in their homes for 10 years, 20 years, 30 years, sometimes even more. It's impossible to fathom that people who have been renting in their homes for that long haven't at least paid the mortgage once, if not multiple times over. So we believe those residents have a right to remain in our community, and we want them to stay, and we want them to continue contributing to the social fabric of our community because they've helped shape our community into what it is. So, the classic definition, what is a community land trust? Typically, a community land trust is a nonprofit run by a board of local community members, technical experts / staff, and CLT residents whose primary mission is to acquire and steward land for the long-term benefit of the community, typically to provide affordable housing. Let's see, I think I wrote a note here for myself that I wanted to make sure I did not omit. Nope, I think I'm okay. It's for this slide. Okay, so this is the structure of, this is the CLT's governance structure. CLTs typically operate with a tripartite board. Like I mentioned in the previous definition, CLT residents, homeowners, lessees most often, sometimes tenants, make up 1/3 of the board. Another third of the board is made up of residents of the community. That can be the neighborhood, the larger city that the CLT operates in. There are some CLTs that operate regionally, so perhaps it's of the region. And then the last third is made up of technical experts and other mission-aligned org reps, potentially. So the note here that I had for myself is that this is a slide where I want to really emphasize that this is one of the sort of hallmarks of a CLT. This is where we bake in some resident control over the units that they live in, right? The CLT resident, 1/3 of the board being made up of CLT residents, whether they're homeowners, lessees, or tenants, is one of those things by design that CLTs do to really integrate the voices and power of the people who live in the units who we serve. Not all CLTs are member organizations, but some of them are. Ours, PAHALI CLT, is a member organization, and that's a sort of added layer of community involvement and community decision-making that we really love about our specific organization. So our members, the members of our organization get to vote on the board of directors, and they have other ways that they can influence the sort of strategies for the organization for that year. There's other sort of channels of communication, but member organization CLTs, you don't have to opt to be a member organization, but you could be, and we really love that we are. So, how do we start a CLT? How do they usually get started? There isn't exactly just one single way. There's 3 ways up here that I'll talk a little bit about. And as I was glancing through this slide, preparing, I remembered that I know of a few examples of even different ways that some CLTs have gotten started. The first one is volunteer-initiated transitional board. So a group of people who really care about community, who really care about housing, who really care about equitable access to housing, come together and agree to create a transitional board. Typically, it tends to be made up of residents of the community and technical experts, in my experience. I mainly see people start there. And there's usually always the vision of it being a transitional board in the sense that we know we need to get CLT residents on the board as soon as we either acquire a property or as we continue to really get our feet underneath us and grow as an organization. The second way is incubated by a nonprofit. So a nonprofit finds this to be a really powerful approach to addressing housing issues in their community. And perhaps there are some people who are interested in doing the work and they have some talent on staff. Different ways. I've seen CLTs incubated by nonprofits in different ways, but I'll be able to speak a little bit more to that in a few slides, because PAHALI CLT, although we initially started as a volunteer-initiated transitional board, we, a few years ago, joined forces with a nonprofit, our local CDC, nonprofit affordable housing developer in East Palo Alto, who's currently helping incubate us so we can really get our feet underneath us. And then the third way is that it can be incubated by a government agency. Perhaps it's the goal of the city or jurisdiction that one is looking at to have a CLT model in their community, and it becomes a sort of project of the public agency. And there is at least one example that I know of. I believe in Bakersfield, their CLT is currently being incubated by the city of Bakersfield. So a little bit more into the basic nuts and bolts of the CLT model. What is the CLT model for affordability? This is probably one of the most preliminary questions that I get whenever I talk to new friends about the CLT model. They say, Ofelia, this all sounds very cool, but how does it actually work? How do you make these $1 million homes affordable to people who really want to get their foot in the door for first-time homeownership? Really, the nutshell is that we separate the value of the land from the value of the home, or whatever structure is on top. Typically a home. For us, typically a single-family home. So the resident ownership component is that they own the building, the home that sits on top of the land. Provides security, equity, it has inheritance rights. The community land trust owns the land underneath. So we bring those two components together through a ground lease. We lease the ground underneath the home to the resident, to the homeowner for 99 years. And it's through this ground lease that we ensure exclusive use of the land, continued affordability through resale price restrictions, and all sorts of fun, wonky nuts and bolts that go into the very long ground leases, but very powerful, powerful tools for ensuring that this work is done well. And this is essentially the core of it. Oh, I know what my next slide is. Have y'all ever seen a house, whether it's here in San Luis Obispo, and it could be anywhere else, and it's for sale, and you see the price tag, and you say, this house can't be worth that. It's probably priced a little bit too high. Yeah, I think we may all have at some point. Well, I wanted to share this news article clip from the Bay Area. Fire-charred San Francisco Bay Area home, specifically in Walnut Creek, just sold for $1 million. I wish I could say this is some funny outlier thing, and this is the only time that I've seen a news clipping like this, but it's not. I've seen shacks go for upwards of $800,000, $900,000 in Oakland, in Berkeley, and they truly look not too much better than this. So when I ask folks, the lay person in community who's interested in the concept, but says, this ground lease stuff, the formula sounds kind of wonky, sounds kind of complicated, I really go back to saying, oftentimes when we see the price tag on a home, we're not paying for the asset on top. We're not paying for the improvements, the structure. We're paying for the land. The land is what's really valuable. So if the CLT model is to separate those two, and we take the approach of taking the value of the land out of the price of the home, that is what allows us to sell it back to a resident for a much more affordable price. We're retaining the land in perpetuity, and the owner gets to perhaps, instead of needing to pay $1 million for the home, gets to buy it for $400,000, $450,000. Which still feels steep when I say it out loud, but trust me, is a big bargain in East Palo Alto and in the Bay Area in general. You might be asking yourself, what happens after the 99 years? We renew it. You get another 99 years, and then another 99 years after that, as long as all mutual parties continue to uphold the agreements that are in the ground lease. Like we mentioned a little bit earlier, it is inheritable. You can pass it down to your children. I believe there might be slightly different language in the ground lease depending on the CLT. If if the inheritance expands beyond children, nieces and nephews, I think there's a little bit of variance. But when you create your CLT, I think that's part of the considerations that community members help you to think about, especially in a community like East Palo Alto that has so many multi-generational homes. Maybe it can't just be children. There's extended family members who we want to be able to include in that inheritance clause, what have you. So may vary a little bit, but that is really the spirit of it, to be able to, for that home to be able to stay with your family in perpetuity. Okay, so for my fellow avid visual learners, I just included a couple more graphics that really explain the same thing and helped me cement it in my mind when I help explain it to friends who are interested in the concept, or to just people who are wanting to explore this as a possibility for their community. Clicker time? Yes, sort of. Not sure how well that comes across, but so to just go through the graphic one more time, a new buyer purchases the house but leases the land underneath from the CLT. They pay a minimal lease fee to the CLT, typically $100. For us in PAHALI CLT in East Palo Alto, it's $100. And the CLT retains permanent ownership of the land. And that's how the cost, with the cost of the land removed, that's how the home is more affordable to the buyer. So, I've been talking a lot about homes on CLT land because that's typically what a lot of, most of the CLTs that I work with and I know about throughout California, vast majority are working on homes on top of CLT land. And it's different types of homes on CLT land. Let's see. So single family homes, that's a big one that I speak to because that's a huge part of the landscape, the housing landscape in East Palo Alto. You can have a limited equity housing cooperative or other types of housing cooperatives on top, a condominium, a multifamily rental. So, there's a mix. It's a sort of implied mix here of potential homeownership, maybe tenancy, all sitting on top of community-owned land. But the possibilities do extend beyond housing. You may have heard before of sort of the conservationist open space land trusts. Similar concept and sort of referenced here. There can be urban agriculture, small businesses, community spaces. At last year's California CLT network, we were able to visit an urban agricultural CLT that in Fresno. It was gorgeous land that was being underutilized, very fertile, could help feed the community, but it didn't have anything going on top of it. Local community members, farm workers, all organized to help turn that empty plot of land into a garden that could help feed the community, help employ people, and help keep people rooted and feel really proud about the work that they do. So that was a beautiful example that immediately came to mind when I was refreshing my memory on this graphic here. And then I do want to highlight for a quick second the community spaces part because PAHALI Community Land Trust has done something a little bit innovative by acquiring a grassroots nonprofit organization's brick and mortar headquarters in East Palo Alto in our portfolio. That happened as a result of their imminent displacement and longstanding partnership with PAHALI Community Land Trust and EPACANDO, our nonprofit incubator. And the timing is right, the opportunity aligned. It really arose from opportunity. I don't think we quite had it in our mission or in our goals to acquire anything beyond housing, but we were able to save a very beloved community organization from displacement in our community. And it turns out that their site can have 2 additional dwelling units built on top of it, ADUs, that is currently in the plans. That's currently something that we're working on. So getting a little bit more into what the responsibilities of a CLT are. What does stewardship entail? It entails a lot, but here's a sort of distilled bullet point list of what some of those things include. On the asset management and administration side, monitoring and enforcement of regulations can include verifying people's incomes, ensuring that if a resale does happen, those resale formulas are honored and everything is going smoothly. Management of welfare tax exemption applications, specifically for sites that are leased to low-income tenants. Administration of a ground lease fee for services, any of the sort of back-end work needed around getting property tax valuations done right, all sorts of little quirks in that area. And then on the supportive services side, it can include financial counseling, foreclosure prevention, community building events and opportunities to kind of really help people get comfortable with becoming decision makers in the land trust, sharing of resources. I will say, and I do want to highlight though, that for us, being a small organization, the financial counseling and foreclosure prevention piece is currently outsourced for us. We are a small and mighty organization, but we certainly are not able to do all of this. And I'll get a little bit into that as well in just a moment. But the financial counseling and the foreclosure prevention are both things that PAHALI CLT currently doesn't quite have the capacity to do in-house. So we have amazing partners that help us with outsourcing those services. So now to the funding and resourcing of CLTs. One of the very correct and important questions that people will ask when they hear about this is, so where do you get your funding from? How do you make all this work happen? And it is a list of different ways, as you see reflected here on this slide. Public agencies is one way, whether it be local jurisdictions, county or state programs. Those will vary, of course, but those are some of the avenues in government that we see that sometimes provide funding and resources for CLTs. Sometimes acquisition funding, sometimes gap financing, sometimes technical assistance. Philanthropy is a huge one for us. Philanthropy, especially as a small organization, before people want to take a risk on you, they want to see other people chip in. And philanthropy has been a very generous player in the CLT landscape for us. And this comes through in the form of grants, also technical assistance, sometimes in-kind donations. Program and operating revenues. This one is interesting, and it's a little bit of a sticky one because, as you might imagine, a $100 ground lease fee is not quite going to cover too much of administration, too much of the administration fees associated with running a CLT until or unless you have a really big portfolio. You really need that scale to be able to really begin bringing in the necessary level of program and operating revenues that can help you become sustainable. So that's one of the things to keep in mind there. Low-cost financing, of course, from banks, from CDFIs, and other sorts of funding and resourcing that we've seen have been through land donations, through bargain sales. We love sellers who will give really good discounts because they believe in the mission. Crowdfunding, grassroots fundraising campaigns, both ways that we saw both methods that we saw be really effective in our purchase of the nonprofit in East Palo Alto that was imminently going to be displaced. So tried and true. And now to the where. CLTs exist all throughout California. You may have heard that they're a very popular model and really abundant on the East Coast, which would be true. And they have also exploded across California in the last few years. I know this because I personally was involved in the California Community Land Trust Network about 8-ish years ago, and I have seriously seen our list of members grow exponentially just in that amount of time. Throughout California Community Land Trust, we are really, really thrilled to see 50 CLTs throughout 25 counties, 1,650 plus units of housing, over 3,500 residents, and 75% of our residents are Black, Indigenous, people of color, folks who have traditionally had a really hard time getting into homeownership or stable housing for all of the reasons that we covered up earlier in the presentation in the beginning. So let's see, can I find San Luis Obispo? I found Santa Barbara. And I definitely have an eye for Santa Barbara. Jessica knows this because I've been raving about how much I love Santa Barbara and San Luis Obispo. That's my alma mater is UCSB. So that's where I immediately able to see this region. You guys are missing here, friends. So we'll put you on the map next time. And now I've arrived to the portion of the presentation where I'll go just a little bit deeper into PAHALI Community Land Trust and tell you a little bit about how we made RCLT happen. We incorporated in 2011, like I mentioned a little earlier, entirely volunteer-run transitional board initially. We're able to be incubated to accomplish a partnership with EPACANDO to be incubated in 2021. So have been in operation for 15 years, but vast majority of those years we were kind of hobbling along, entirely volunteer run, really struggling and trying to get our first acquisition, which we ultimately finally did. We currently still run on 1.2 staff time. The one is right here with you. The 0.25 is time from my colleague at EPACANDO. And we are a very small organization in terms of budget with $130,000. Why we're able to operate and continue working is because we have the backing of EPACANDO. So like I mentioned, that nonprofit incubation has really been pivotal to help us remain sustainable. I'll quickly flash our board of directors. You'll see our mission up here that highlights Placekeepers. So again, part of why I was really excited to see your next series. We'll talk about placemaking, placekeeping. We love having people involved in our community land trust that are known for giving back to our community, see themselves as active community members and engage in all sorts of different ways. Teachers, city workers, you name it. Almost to the end here, but wanted, of course, to show you some of our project sites. The yellow Adobe house in the corner is a single-family home converted office that I mentioned earlier, the grassroots nonprofit we were able to save from displacement. A number of single-family homes here, one condo that we acquired because the opportunity arose and also allowed us to do some anti-displacement work. Green Wave Communities, 5 parcels of land that we have a purchase option on to add to our portfolio. And our newest project, an 18-unit new construction ground-up project that is poised to be a limited equity housing co-op. So I promised I would leave you with a couple of resources to explore some more. I can wholeheartedly vouch that California Community Land Trust has amazing, amazing resources, deeply knowledgeable people, probably far more deeply immersed for many years than I myself have been. And Grounded Solutions Network is also a really incredible tool that you can look into to learn a little bit more. And that wraps me up. So I don't know if we have time for questions, but thank you.